The mysterious arrival. The sky was dark, filled with strange, swirling clouds. The air was thick with tension. The alien ship, a vast and powerful vessel, had just crash-landed on an unfamiliar planet. Inside, the crew was still recovering from the violent impact, their bodies bruised and battered, their minds racing with confusion and fear. Their mission had been simple: explore this new planet and collect data. But nothing about this world was as it seemed. Captain Thaler, the leader of the mission, was the first to regain consciousness. He groaned as he slowly rose from his seat, rubbing his head. His eyes blinked in the dim light of the ship's interior. The ship was in ruins, and the sharp smell of burning fuel filled the air. His crew, still groggy and disoriented, were beginning to stir around him. The crash had thrown them off course, and now they found themselves stranded in an unknown, hostile land. Status report. Thaler ordered, his voice firm despite the pain coursing through his body. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Vera, quickly scrambled to her feet and checked the ship's systems. "Everything is offline, Captain," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Communications are down. We've lost all power. We're stuck here." Thaler nodded, his heart sinking. They had been on a mission to scout a new world, but now they were stranded in a place they knew nothing about. A sense of dread settled over him. He had seen the way the planet looked from space: dark, foreboding, and alive with strange, unknown energy. It was as though the planet itself was watching them. "Take a team and check the exterior," Thaler ordered. "See what we're dealing with." Vera nodded and quickly organized a group of soldiers. Thaler watched them leave the wreckage, stepping cautiously into the unknown. His crew moved slowly, every one of them on edge, as if they could feel the weight of something powerful and dangerous lurking just beyond their sight. The trees surrounding the crash site were tall and twisted, their branches curling into strange shapes, as if they were reaching out to touch the crew. The wind blew harshly through the leaves, sending a shiver down Thaler's spine. As the group ventured further into the forest, the strange sounds of the alien wildlife echoed around them. They couldn't make sense of it. Sharp, piercing cries followed by eerie growls and rustling noises in the distance. It was like something was moving just out of view, watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. "I don't like this," one of the soldiers muttered, gripping his weapon tightly. "This place feels wrong." "Stay alert," Thaler replied. "We don't know what's out here." They continued to move forward, their footsteps muffled by the thick underbrush. Suddenly, one of the soldiers stopped and held up his hand, signaling for the others to halt. He pointed toward a strange structure in the distance. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was massive, towering above the trees, its surface glowing faintly with a blue light. That wasn't here before," Vera said, her voice barely a whisper. Thaler's eyes narrowed. "What is it?" "I don't know, Captain," she replied. "But it wasn't here when we first landed." The group approached cautiously, their weapons drawn, every nerve on edge. The air seemed to grow heavier as they neared the structure, and an unsettling feeling washed over them. The closer they got, the more unnatural it felt, as if the very ground beneath their feet was alive. "We need to be careful," Thaler warned. "This could be a trap." But before anyone could respond, a loud crack echoed from behind them, followed by the unmistakable sound of something heavy moving through the forest. The crew spun around, their weapons raised, their hearts pounding in their chests. Out of the trees emerged a massive figure, its form barely visible in the shadows. It was tall, impossibly tall, and its body seemed to blend into the darkness like it was part of the very night itself. Its eyes glowed a terrifying red, piercing through the darkness and locking onto them. The air around it crackled with a strange, unnatural energy. Thaler's heart stopped for a moment. He had seen many alien creatures in his time, but this was something different. This was no ordinary predator. The sheer power radiating from the creature was unlike anything he had ever felt. "What is that?" one of the soldiers whispered, fear creeping into his voice. Filler couldn't answer. His mind raced, trying to process what he was seeing. The creature's body was covered in thick, armor-like skin, and its massive claws scraped against the ground as it moved. The air seemed to shimmer around it, as if the very atmosphere was reacting to its presence. There was no doubt now. The aliens were no longer in control of this situation. The creature let out a low guttural growl, its red eyes locked onto the crew. It took a step forward, and the ground beneath it shook. The soldiers tensed, weapons raised, but none of them fired. Something about this creature made them hesitate, unsure of how to proceed. "Stay calm," Filler ordered, his voice steady despite the fear that was creeping into his own mind. "We don't know if it's hostile." But as the creature took another step forward, the ground rumbled violently, and the trees around them began to sway, as if they were being pulled toward the creature by some invisible force. The alien soldiers glanced nervously at one another, realizing they were trapped in a living nightmare. The first encounter. The ground shook violently as the creature lunged at them. Its massive form moved with terrifying speed, like a shadow ripping through the trees. Thaler's heart raced as he barked orders to his crew, but his voice seemed distant, drowned out by the sound of the creature's deafening roar. It wasn't like anything they had ever encountered before. The way it moved, the sheer power in its muscles, it was unlike any animal from their galaxy. "Fire!" Thaler shouted, pulling his own weapon from its holster. The soldiers hesitated for only a second before opening fire, their weapons blazing with bright, deadly beams of energy. The creature didn't flinch. The blasts hit its thick, armored hide, but the creature barely seemed to notice. It growled louder, each rumble shaking the ground beneath them. The soldiers fired again, their weapons straining under the pressure, but it was as if the creature was impervious to their attacks. Filler watched in horror as the beast effortlessly swatted aside the incoming fire, the blasts evaporating harmlessly before they could even reach its body. "Nothing's working," shouted Lieutenant Vira, her voice filled with panic. Fall back now," Filler commanded, but the words barely left his mouth when the creature's huge claws swept through the air with unimaginable force. One of the soldiers, a young private named Corin, was struck by the creature's swipe and sent flying across the forest floor. His scream was cut short as he crashed into a tree, his body crumpling in a heap. Thaler's stomach twisted as he watched, but there was no time to mourn. The creature was already charging toward them, its glowing red eyes locked onto the remaining soldiers. The terror on their faces was undeniable. "Move! Move!" Thaler shouted, leading the group in a desperate sprint toward the ship. The creature didn't pursue immediately. It seemed to enjoy the chaos, as though it was toying with them. Thaler glanced back and saw the towering beast slowly loping after them, its claws digging into the earth with every step, leaving deep marks in the soil. "Keep running. Get to the ship," Thaler shouted again, his heart hammering in his chest. The alien soldiers scrambled, their feet pounding against the ground. The dense trees seemed to close in around them, twisting in unnatural ways. It was as though the forest itself had come alive and was trying to trap them in its grip. Thaler could hear the branches creaking, the wind whistling ominously through the canopy. The ship was still some distance away, but Thaler knew they couldn't outrun the creature. Not with its terrifying speed, not with its power. "Over there," Lieutenant Vera shouted, pointing to a small clearing in the forest. Thaler saw a large rock formation near the edge, a potential hideout. They could try to use the rocks for cover, maybe even get a shot in if the creature came too close. It wasn't much, but it was their only chance. They sprinted toward the formation, but just as they neared the rocks, the ground beneath them trembled. A shadow loomed overhead. The creature had caught up to them, faster than any of them could have predicted. The soldiers whirled around, their weapons raised, but the creature was already too close. It let out a low growl, deep and rumbling, as it stopped just a few feet away. Thaler could feel the heat from its body, its intense presence washing over him like a wave. The creature's red eyes gleamed, narrowing as it studied the group. It was intelligent, more intelligent than Thaler had first realized. It wasn't simply a mindless predator. No, this creature was calculating, deliberate, and it was enjoying every moment of the chase. The soldiers backed up slowly, trying to find a way to regroup. Their weapons were useless. They were out of options. Thaler knew they had no chance of surviving a direct confrontation. Their technology was no match for the raw power of this beast. The creature growled again, a deep sound that reverberated through their bodies, and took a step forward. Thaler held his ground, trying to project strength, though inside he felt every inch of fear and doubt crawling up his spine. "We need to do something. Fast," one of the soldiers, Narek, yelled. Thaler's mind raced. He looked around quickly, scanning the area for something, anything, that could help them. And then his eyes caught sight of something unexpected. In the center of the clearing, near a large boulder, there was an old, ancient structure. The walls were partially crumbled, but it was still standing, almost as if it had been waiting for them. Thaler's instincts kicked in. It might not be much, but it was their only hope. If they could make it to the structure, they might find a way to turn the tables. "Move to the structure. Now," he shouted. The soldiers hesitated for a moment, uncertainty gripping them. But there was no time to second-guess. The creature was closing in, and they had no other choice. They sprinted for the ancient building, their legs burning with exhaustion, the creature just behind them. They'd reached the structure, its broken walls towering above them. The soldiers quickly dove for cover behind a crumbling stone, gasping for air. The creature stopped a few feet away, its eyes scanning the area, clearly puzzled by their sudden disappearance. Thaler pressed his back against the stone wall, his heart still racing. They had bought themselves a few moments, but it wasn't enough. The creature wouldn't leave them alone. It knew they were hiding, and it would find them. Thaler clenched his fists. The real nightmare had just begun. Panic and desperation. The seconds felt like hours as Thaler pressed his back against the crumbling stone, his breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. The creature had stopped, but its red eyes still glowed, scanning the area around them. Thaler could hear its low growls, like an animal savoring its prey, enjoying the fear it had instilled in the alien soldiers. He dared not look over the edge of the stone to see how close it was, but he could feel its presence in every fiber of his being. The air around him seemed thick with tension, heavy with the promise of death. "We can't stay here," Lieutenant Vera whispered, her voice trembling. She was crouched beside him, gripping her weapon tightly. "It'll find us soon enough." Thaler nodded grimly, his mind racing. They were trapped. The creature wasn't just hunting them. It was playing with them, toying with their fear. And every moment they spent hidden behind the broken structure felt like a countdown to their inevitable end. He glanced back toward the crash site. The ship was too far to reach, and even if they did get there, they were in no condition to defend themselves. There was no way they could repair the ship in time to escape. "We need to think," Thaler said, his voice steady despite the panic that churned in his chest. "We can't outrun it. We can't fight it. So we need to outsmart it." Vyra looked at him, her eyes wide with fear. "Outsmart it? How? It's a monster. We don't even know what it is." Thaler clenched his jaw, feeling the weight of her words. They didn't know what the creature was, or where it had come from, but they couldn't afford to just sit here and wait to die. "Stay low," Thaler ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "I'll scout ahead. I need to know if there's a way out of here." Vyra and the others exchanged uncertain glances, but there was no time to argue. Thaler motioned for them to stay behind the cover of the stones as he slowly moved to the edge of the structure. His every movement was slow, deliberate, careful not to make a sound. He peered around the corner, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature was still there, just a few feet away. It was sniffing the ground, its massive claws scraping against the earth as it prowled around the clearing. Fettler's throat tightened as he watched it, the way its muscles rippled beneath its thick, armored skin, the way its eyes seemed to glow even brighter in the dark. It wasn't just a predator. It was a force of nature, an unstoppable machine built to hunt. Then something caught his eye. In the distance, barely visible through the trees, was another structure, a tall tower, perhaps a mile away. The sight of it gave Fettler a sliver of hope. It looked like it could be a building of some kind, and maybe, just maybe, it could offer them shelter, or at the very least, a place to regroup. Fettler's mind raced. They could make a run for it. Try to reach the tower before the creature noticed them. But the creature was fast. If they ran, it would catch them. There was no way they could outrun it. Then another thought struck him. Maybe they didn't have to outrun it. Maybe they could fight fire with fire. He turned back to the others, moving quickly but silently. He needed to get them to that tower, but he also needed to make sure they were prepared. They wouldn't survive another direct attack like the last one. "We're moving," Fettler whispered as he returned to the group. "There's a tower up ahead. It's our only shot." Vira's eyes widened in disbelief. "But it's a mile away. We can't outrun that thing. It will catch us. We don't have a choice," Fettler said, his voice sharp. "We're going to have to lure it away. We need to draw its attention." A murmur of disbelief spread through the group, but there was no time for hesitation. Fettler's mind was set. They couldn't just sit here and wait to be killed. If they wanted to survive, they needed to take a chance. "All right," he continued, his tone resolute. "We're going to split up. Lieutenant Vira, you'll take half the team and head toward the tower. Make sure you stay low and don't engage unless necessary. The rest of you with me." Vera opened her mouth to argue but then closed it again, her expression hardening. She didn't like the plan, but she knew it was their only hope. "We need to be quick. Once we draw its attention, we move fast," Fettler ordered. The group nodded, and for the first time, there was a flicker of determination in their eyes. They knew the creature was too powerful to fight head-on, but if they could use the environment to their advantage, maybe they stood a chance. The soldiers quickly moved into position. Fettler and his group prepared to act first. He could hear the creature moving closer, its massive feet crunching through the leaves, and he knew it was only a matter of time before it found them. "On my signal," Fettler whispered, pulling out a small device from his belt. It was a flare, a bright, blinding flare that would attract the creature's attention and hopefully lead it in the wrong direction. He waited, counting the seconds, his pulse racing. The moment felt as though it was stretching, the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Fettler's eyes locked onto the creature, just a few feet away. It was too close. They had to move. "Now," Fettler shouted, igniting the flare and tossing it high into the air. The flare shot up with a brilliant, blinding light, casting long shadows across the clearing. The creature roared in confusion, its glowing eyes narrowing in response to the sudden burst of light. It turned toward the flare, drawn to the strange, bright signal. Without wasting a second, Fettler and his team sprinted toward the cover of the forest, zigzagging between the trees to make themselves harder to track. Behind them, the flare continued to burn brightly, distracting the creature and leading it away from the others. Vira and her group began their own dash for the tower, moving quickly and silently through the trees. The moment of truth had come. The Tower of Secrets. Fettler's heart pounded in his chest as he pushed himself harder, his boots slamming against the soft ground, the trees blurring past him. He dared not look back, knowing that if he did, it would only slow him down. The flare he had launched into the air burned bright behind him, the light casting strange, flickering shadows through the forest. The creature was momentarily distracted, but Fettler knew it wouldn't be fooled for long. The beast would be back on their trail in no time. Beside him, Lieutenant Vera and the rest of the soldiers kept pace, their expressions grim but determined. Their path was clear, but every muscle in Thaler's body screamed with exhaustion. They hadn't run this far in years, and now they were running for their lives, not knowing what would happen when they reached the tower. He glanced over his shoulder for a moment, catching a glimpse of the fiery red glow in the distance. The creature's eyes shone like twin orbs of death, and its deep growls vibrated in the air, sending a shiver down his spine. "It's getting closer," Vera shouted from ahead, her voice strained but steady. "We won't make it in time." Feller's mind raced. The tower wasn't much farther, but in the dense forest, a mile felt like an eternity. They had to get there. They couldn't afford to fail now. "There, over there," shouted Narek, one of the soldiers behind Thaler. He pointed to the distant outline of the tower, partially obscured by the thick canopy. It was a massive structure, like a jagged black spike cutting through the sky. It loomed like a forgotten sentinel, its surface sleek and mysterious. The soldiers pushed forward, their breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The tower seemed to grow taller with every step they took, its form both imposing and strangely alien. As they approached, they could see more details. The walls of the tower were smooth and metallic, and strange markings were etched into the surface. It looked ancient, but at the same time, its construction was beyond anything Thaler had ever seen before. He couldn't tell if it was built by the creatures they were running from, or something far older. "We've got to hurry," Thaler urged, his eyes darting around. The forest around them was unnervingly quiet now, the sounds of wildlife replaced by the heavy panting of the soldiers. But he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The creature was out there somewhere, and it wouldn't stop until it found them. They reached the base of the tower, and Thaler immediately noticed that there was no visible door, no clear way inside. The surface of the tower was smooth, like it had been sealed shut. His pulse quickened. "How do we get in?" he demanded, turning to Vera. She scanned the area, her eyes narrowing in thought. "There has to be an entrance somewhere. We just have to find it." The soldiers quickly spread out, checking the perimeter, looking for any hidden entrances or clues. Thaler pressed his hand against the cool surface of the tower, running his fingers over the smooth, cold metal. It was almost like it was alive, like it was reacting to their presence. He could feel an odd electric hum under his fingertips, as if the tower was awakening. "Captain," Narek's voice broke through Thaler's concentration. "Over here." Thaler hurried to Narek's side, where the soldier was standing in front of what appeared to be a hidden panel in the base of the tower. The panel was barely noticeable, just a faint seam running across the metal. Thaler pressed against it, but nothing happened. "Is this it?" Vera asked, coming up behind them. "It has to be," Thaler replied. "It's the only option we've got." With a deep breath, Thaler pressed harder against the panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low rumble, the panel shifted, revealing a narrow opening that led downward. A cold, dry breeze wafted out, carrying with it an odd scent, like metal, but something else, something ancient and strange. Thaler's instincts screamed at him to run, to get away from this place, but he knew they had no choice. The creature would be here any second, and if they didn't get inside, they would die in the open. "Move," Thaler shouted. The soldiers scrambled into the narrow opening, their weapons ready, their eyes darting nervously around the darkness. As they descended into the tower, the air grew colder, and the walls seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. The only light came from the faint glow of their weapons and the occasional flicker of something deeper within the tower. They reached the bottom of the staircase, and Thaler turned to face his team. "Stay close," he ordered, his voice low and cautious. "We don't know what's inside, but we can't afford to be separated." The soldiers nodded, but Thaler could see the fear in their eyes. Whatever was waiting for them inside this tower, it was not going to be friendly. The ancient alien structure hummed with an unsettling energy, and as they moved deeper into its bowels, The oppressive silence was almost suffocating. They came to a large chamber at the base of the tower, the walls covered in strange symbols and markings that pulsed with an eerie, faint blue glow. The floor was smooth and metallic, almost as though it had been polished by centuries of use. In the center of the room was a massive device, something Thaler couldn't even begin to understand. It looked like a giant, intricately designed machine, but its purpose was unclear. Strange, shifting lights danced across its surface, and as they approached, the air around it seemed to crackle with energy. This place. Vira's voice trailed off as she took in the sight. What is it? I don't know, Thaler admitted, but it's too quiet in here. I don't like it. Before he could say anything more, a loud screeching sound echoed through the chamber, reverberating off the walls. It wasn't the creature from outside. This was something different, something far worse. And then the ground began to tremble. The awakening. The ground shook beneath their feet as the low, screeching sound continued to reverberate through the chamber. The walls seemed to vibrate with the noise, a deep, unnatural hum filling the air. Thaler's eyes darted around, searching for the source of the disturbance. He could feel the tension in the air, the oppressive weight of something ancient and powerful stirring to life. Get ready, Thaler whispered, motioning for his team to take cover. Their weapons were useless against the creature outside, but here, in the heart of this mysterious tower, they might have a chance. The chamber was large, with high curved walls that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. The device in the center of the room gleamed with an eerie blue light, its surface shifting and changing as if alive. Vira crouched beside him, her eyes wide with fear. What is that thing? What's happening? I don't know, Thaler replied, his voice low, barely a whisper. But whatever it is, it's not friendly. As they watched, the shifting lights on the device began to accelerate, flashing more rapidly, as if it were coming to life. The strange hum in the air grew louder, a discordant sound that reverberated through their bodies. Thaler's skin crawled with the sensation of being watched, and for the first time, he felt truly helpless. They had made it inside the tower, but now it seemed as though they were trapped in something far worse. Suddenly, the device at the center of the room emitted a blinding flash of light, so bright it burned their eyes. Thaler's heart skipped a beat as the floor beneath them shifted. The smooth, metallic surface cracked open in several places, revealing dark, gaping chasms. One by one, panels in the walls slid open with a grinding noise, and glowing symbols began to appear on the walls. Symbols Thaler couldn't understand, but they seemed to pulse in time with the humming of the device. Is it trying to communicate? Lieutenant Vera asked, her voice trembling. Thaler wasn't sure. The entire room felt alive, as though the tower itself was awakening, responding to the device's power. It was as if the structure had been dormant for centuries, and now, with their arrival, it was coming to life, ready to reveal its secrets, or maybe something much darker. Before Thaler could answer, the screeching sound rose to a deafening level, and a terrifying, guttural growl echoed from deep within the chamber. The sound seemed to originate from the very walls, reverberating off every surface. Thaler's blood ran cold. The growl wasn't just a noise. It was a presence, an unmistakable sign that something was coming. The hairs on the back of Thaler's neck stood on end as the floor trembled again. A series of hissing sounds filled the air, and then, from the shadows at the far end of the chamber, something began to move. Something massive. It was impossible to see at first, but then a pair of glowing red eyes appeared from the darkness, like twin beacons of death. The creature was here. It stepped into the light, and Thaler's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't the same creature they had been running from outside. It was something worse, something far more terrifying. The creature before them was not only massive, but it was also armored in layers of thick, blackened plating. Its eyes gleamed with intelligence, but there was something more sinister in them. The sheer presence of this being made Thaler's stomach twist with dread. The creature didn't seem to care about them. Yet, It turned its attention to the device at the center of the room, its eyes scanning the symbols on the walls. Then, with a horrifying growl, it lunged toward the machine, its claws scraping across the floor as it reached for the device. "Move!" Thaler shouted, grabbing Vira by the arm and pulling her toward the far side of the room. The rest of the soldiers quickly followed, trying to make sense of what was happening. But there was no time for strategy. The creature was too close, and if it activated the machine, Thaler feared what might happen. They ran for cover, ducking behind one of the broken panels in the walls. Thaler's heart was pounding in his chest. He could hear the creature growling, its massive claws scraping against the floor as it reached for the device. It was like a beast in the dark, drawn to something it didn't fully understand. And they were in the middle of it. "What is it doing?" Vera whispered, her voice barely audible over the sounds of the creature's growls. Thaler watched with horror as the creature pressed its massive hand against the device. The symbols on the walls seemed to respond to its touch, glowing brighter, pulsing in time with the growl of the beast. And then, the impossible happened. The device began to hum louder, faster. The ground trembled beneath them again. And suddenly, with a terrifying screech, a massive portal opened in the center of the room. The light from the portal spilled out, blinding them all. It was a swirling mass of energy, twisting and changing shape, and from within, Thaler could feel a deep otherworldly force, something that seemed to reach into his very soul. "This isn't just a tower," Thaler realized, his voice shaking. "It's a gateway." The creature stepped back, its eyes narrowing as it observed the portal. The room was bathed in an eerie, supernatural glow, and the air felt thick with danger. Thaler could feel the tension in the air, as if everything was building toward something catastrophic. "Get ready," Thaler murmured to his team, his voice grim. "Whatever is coming through that portal, we need to be prepared." Before anyone could respond, a roar from the depths of the portal echoed throughout the chamber. It was the sound of something hungry, something powerful, and it was coming for them. Thaler tightened his grip on his weapon. They had barely survived one nightmare. Now, it seemed like a much worse one was about to step into their world. The otherworldly threat. The portal shimmered violently, its swirling mass of energy now brighter than ever. It seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm, like a heartbeat that wasn't entirely their own. Thaler's stomach churned as the roar that had echoed from within the portal reverberated through the chamber. It was the sound of something ancient, something terrible, something that had been waiting to break through into their world. The creature that had been toying with them, the one they had encountered earlier, now stood still. Its massive form was tense, as if it, too, could sense the power emanating from the portal. Its glowing red eyes were locked onto the swirling vortex, its posture predatory. This wasn't just some mindless monster, it was intelligent, and it knew that something far worse than it was about to arrive. "We need to get out of here," Lieutenant Vera hissed, her voice filled with panic. She was crouched behind a large piece of debris, her weapon held tightly in her hands. "That thing doesn't look like it's afraid of what's coming through, but we sure as hell should be." Thaler's eyes didn't leave the portal. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to abandon this cursed place, and take whatever chance they had at survival. But they couldn't run. Not now. Not with the fate of their entire world on the line. "Stay focused," Thaler ordered, his voice low but firm. "We're not running. We're figuring this out." He could feel the presence of the soldiers behind him, their fear palpable, but also a growing sense of determination. There was no turning back now. They had to face whatever horrors this tower had unleashed. But the question lingered in his mind. What exactly was about to come through that portal? Suddenly, the energy from the portal flared up, sending a shockwave through the room. The ground trembled violently, and the walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with the swirling light. Thaler's body went rigid as a massive, shadowy figure began to emerge from the portal, its form massive and indistinct, shifting like smoke but with a solid, monstrous presence. The air around them grew colder, and the faint buzzing sound of the device at the center of the room increased, almost as if it was amplifying the arrival of this new, incomprehensible entity. Thaler's hand tightened around his weapon, though he knew it would be useless against what was coming. Then the figure fully emerged. It was not a creature like anything they had seen. It was towering, its form cloaked in shadow, its body moving in a liquid-like, eerie manner. The air around it seemed to warp, as if it didn't belong to this world. Its eyes, if they could even be called eyes, glowed a sickly yellow, and as it fully manifested, a chilling sense of dread filled the room. This was not just some alien predator. This was something else, something that defied all logic. The creature's long, tendril-like arms extended outwards, reaching towards the walls and the ceiling, as if the very structure of the tower was its to command. The atmosphere crackled with dark energy. It let out an unnatural, inhuman sound, half growl, half scream, that reverberated through every cell in Thaler's body. The very air felt heavy, oppressive. "We need to move now," Thaler shouted, his voice urgent. He wasn't sure where they would go or what they could do, but staying here would mean certain death. The tower had been a sanctuary, but now it was a tomb, and they were trapped in it. Without thinking, he sprinted toward the far side of the room, beckoning the others to follow. His eyes never left the monstrosity that was now fully in their world. The creature's massive tendrils moved with terrifying speed, striking at the air as if testing its new environment. A series of hissing, screeching noises filled the chamber, as if the creature was trying to get a sense of its surroundings. Thaler knew it wouldn't take long for it to find them. Behind him, the rest of the team moved quickly, staying low, their weapons raised but shaking with fear. They couldn't fight something like this. No weapon in their arsenal would stand a chance. The creature wasn't just a physical threat. It was something that bent the very fabric of reality, something that should not exist. But before they could get far, the creature turned. Its eyes locked onto them, and a voice, not one they could hear with their ears, but one they could feel in their bones, seemed to speak directly into Thaler's mind. "You do not belong here." The words were chilling, like the cold wind of a distant planet, and Thaler staggered backward, his mind reeling from the weight of the thought. The creature had spoken to him. It had felt his presence, even in this chaotic moment. Thaler's throat tightened, but he couldn't let fear consume him. The others were looking to him for direction. "Keep moving," he shouted again. "We need to find a way to stop it, or at least slow it down." As they neared the back of the chamber, Thaler saw that a massive reinforced door was set into the far wall, perhaps their only escape. But it was sealed shut, with no visible way to open it. He didn't care how they got through. It had to happen, or they would all die here. "Help me," Thaler ordered, rushing to the door. His mind raced for any solution. But before they could even get to the door, the creature's tendrils lashed out, hitting the walls with explosive force. Sparks flew from the impact, and the entire tower shook violently. Thaler and his team were thrown off balance, crashing to the ground. The creature roared in fury, its voice echoing through the chamber, shaking the very foundation of the tower. Thaler pushed himself to his feet, his vision blurry, but his survival instincts were clear. He turned to Vera. "That door. We have to get through it. Now." She nodded, her face pale but resolute. Together, they rushed toward the door, but the creature wasn't done. With a swipe of its massive arm, it slammed into the walls, causing the floor to crack open. Thaler's heart raced as he heard the rumble of something else, a deeper, more ominous sound. "We're running out of time," Vera said, her voice strained. "Hurry." Thaler tried to force his mind to focus, his fingers scrambling against the control panel of the door. His hand was shaking. "Come on." Just as the creature's roar echoed behind them, a click sounded, and the massive door creaked open. "Go," Thaler shouted. They rushed through the door, not daring to look back. The tower was alive with the creature's fury, and it wouldn't be long before the entire structure collapsed under the force of its rage. But as they fled into the unknown, Feller couldn't shake the feeling that the real nightmare was only just beginning. The final confrontation. The door slammed shut behind them with a deafening crash, the sound reverberating through the narrow corridor they now found themselves in. Feller's heart pounded in his chest, each beat loud enough to echo in his ears. Sweat dripped down his face, his breath ragged from the sheer adrenaline coursing through his body. They had escaped, for now. But the feeling of safety was fleeting. The corridor stretched ahead in a narrow, winding path that seemed to grow darker the further they went. The dim, flickering lights cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the oppressive air seemed to grow heavier, as if the tower itself was holding its breath. Feller knew they couldn't stop. Not now. Not when they still didn't know what they were truly up against. "Where's the exit?" Vera gasped, looking over her shoulder, her eyes filled with fear. The others were equally tense, hands gripped tightly on their weapons, ready for anything. Feller glanced back at her, his mind racing. "I don't know. We have to keep moving. If we stay still, that thing will find us." They had no map of the tower, no clue where to go. It was like they were trapped in some vast, alien maze, each hallway leading to another darkened corridor, each turn more claustrophobic than the last. Feller's instincts told him the creature had already found their trail. Whatever it was no longer just a physical force. It had become a predatory presence, tracking them with an intelligence that felt too calculating, too purposeful. "Feller," Sergeant Ulrich's voice was low, filled with a quiet desperation. "We're not going to make it out, are we?" Feller met his gaze. Ulrich's eyes were wide with panic, his face pale and drawn. Feller couldn't bring himself to lie, but he couldn't let the fear take over either. "We'll find a way," he said, but even he wasn't sure he believed his own words. Suddenly, a loud, reverberating roar echoed down the corridor. The sound was guttural, like the very walls were being torn apart. Feller's blood froze in his veins. He didn't need to look behind him to know the creature was right on their heels. Whatever had emerged from the portal wasn't just hunting them, it was savoring the chase. "Move," Feller barked, urgency in his voice. They broke into a sprint, running as fast as they could, though their legs felt heavy with exhaustion. The sound of the creature's footsteps grew louder with each passing second, and Thaler knew it wasn't far behind. But something in his gut told him this wasn't just a chase, it was a countdown. Time was running out, and they were running out of options. The corridor opened up into a large, circular chamber, its ceiling impossibly high, and the walls lined with strange, glowing symbols. The air felt thick, heavy with the same energy that had surrounded the device in the center of the tower. At the far end of the room, a strange, pulsing blue light illuminated a massive door. It looked different from all the other doors they had encountered, more solid, more real. "Do you think that's an exit?" Lieutenant Vera asked breathlessly, her voice full of hope. Thaler didn't answer. He was already moving toward the door, his instincts screaming that this might be their only chance. The creature was coming closer, its growls now an overwhelming presence in the air. But as they approached the door, something changed. The pulsing blue light flickered, and the symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, faster. The floor beneath their feet began to shake again, and an ominous hum filled the chamber. Thaler's heart skipped a beat as the walls shifted, revealing massive, dark tendrils, similar to the creature's own, beginning to emerge from cracks in the stone. "No, no," Thaler whispered to himself. "It's not the end. It can't be the end." The room began to pulse with a violent energy, and the tendrils slowly extended outward, reaching for them. It was as if the tower itself was alive and wanted to keep them trapped forever. But then, with an ear-splitting crack, the massive door at the far end of the room burst open, revealing an intense, blinding light. Thaler didn't think twice. He ran toward it with everything he had, shouting for the others to follow. "Go. Now." One by one, the soldiers surged forward, pushing themselves faster than they ever had before. The creature was close now, its monstrous form appearing in the doorway just behind them. Filler could hear its heavy footsteps, each one like a thunderclap. The door was nearly closed, but just as the last soldier crossed the threshold, the room shook once more, and the door slammed shut with a deafening boom. Filler barely had time to catch his breath as the light dimmed. They were standing in a new room, a wide open chamber filled with strange alien machinery. It was unlike anything they had seen before. The walls were lined with complex tubes, wires, and pulsating energy conduits. In the center of the room stood a tall, crystalline structure, humming with an eerie power. But they didn't have time to analyze their surroundings. The distant roar of the creature filled the chamber. It was still out there, just beyond the door they had sealed behind them. But its presence wasn't the only thing they had to worry about. Feller's eyes narrowed as he scanned the room. There was something else here, a low, constant hum, like a machine powering up. He realized with a sudden, horrifying clarity that the real threat had never been the creature itself. It had been what the creature was trying to protect. "It's not over," Thaler muttered, his voice low but filled with a grim realization. The crystal in the center of the room flared with a blinding light. It was powering up, and whatever it was about to unleash, it would be far worse than anything they had faced so far. They weren't just fighting for their survival anymore. They were fighting for the survival of their entire world.